Welcome Virgo to your in-depth monthly forecast for May 2025. Your ruler Mercury is going to make its way through 3 zodiac signs this month. That's really exciting, but it does bring potentially some extra complexity, but certainly some opportunities too, especially professionally, because by the end of this month, the chance for you to raise your profile and to reach people in positions of influence is enormous. But as we go into this month, Mercury is in the part of your chart to do with initiation, Aries, but for you personally to do with some kind of transformation. That transformation may be in terms of your thinking, it may be in terms of your deeper psychological understanding. In a more prosaic way, it could be around shared resources or finances, or it could even be around investments. And of course, investments and money has been a hot topic over the last month. But for you, April also saw Venus, the relator, and the money planet in a tight clench with Saturn, the planet of resistance, on 2 occasions. Now, that has meant that maybe you needed to consider how other people viewed you, or how you were relating to them. That may have been professionally, may have been in friendships, may have been personally. So Saturn's very complex, it's much maligned. It could have meant that last month there were some quite tense moments around relationships, but there may also have been an opportunity to get much clearer about what you were prepared to give, but also assert what you wanted as your minimum requirement. In other words, set your boundary. As we start this month, Venus returns back to the sign of Aries. But as it does, it forges a mesmeric link to Neptune. Now in the 8th house, that combination could mean that if someone has really captured your attention and the early dialogue has been really constructive and you are feeling very hopeful about what you could do, as long as in a sensitive way you feel they're in touch with you, and with the Sun in your sister Earth sign of Taurus, very much to do with higher truths, if it all feels right, there could be some kind of alliance forged at the start of this month, which could be very good indeed. But Neptune can also distort, so if you are talking about long-term financial planning, just be conscious of that. But also, by the 4th, Pluto, the planet of transformation, which is in your sector of health, work, obligations, that's pushing you, and has been in 3 stages since the 11-week first visit at the end of March 23, and then 21 Jan to 2nd of September last year, 19 November to now, pushing you to have a very honest look at your approach to the structure of your life, which is quite hard for Virgos because you take great pride in being very efficient and having the key pieces of knowledge that sometimes other people are not bothered with. They're too caught up in the big picture, whereas your meticulous approach often rewards you. But Pluto's actually challenging you at the moment to think about what you may in some ways transform. But because of Pluto's link to Venus through that first week of this month, I think it's possible that you could redeploy your resources in a new way which squeezes more from them. But also you could gain some psychological insights into your personal well-being and physical health by getting more knowledge, and that knowledge may be somewhat of an eye-opener, because something that you may have thought you had all of the information around, there may be more to gain, and that actually can help you in a very constructive way if you're open to the process. Because what happens with Pluto, it gives us a chance to lead the evolution and to really embrace it, but if we resist it, what Pluto can sometimes do is impose it. So for example, if you are working somewhere where it is just going to change because everything's changing so quickly, the sooner that you confront that, the sooner you can flex and use your experience and skills in a different way somewhere else. Now, on the 5th of the month, Venus emerges from shadow. So the retrograde ended on the 13th of April. Remember then, Venus was in your sector of relating, but it coming out of the shadow period suggests that if there has been a time of uncertainty around relationships, you're going to have a much greater idea of where you stand. You might not necessarily have taken actions at that point, because by the 10th, your ruler Mercury moves into Zodiac sign 2 and joins up with the Sun and Uranus in the freedom-loving 9th house. Very much about expanding your horizons. Mercury can be about information, of course, the 9th house, higher knowledge. If you've often thought that you'd like to do an additional course, or you never had the opportunity to have formal education when you were younger, that is something that you could seriously consider over the next couple of weeks. But equally, Mercury does go on to clash with Mars and Pluto. Because if we go back to the 18th of April, and indeed if we go back to the 4th of November through to the 6th of January, Mars was in a very tender part of your situation. Mars is, of course, about assertion, action, can be a very dynamic, energizing planet, but in the 12th house, as it has returned to on the 18th of April, it can be very, very challenging at times. Our emotions can be quite up and down. Even if you pride yourself on someone who has a real sense of equilibrium about life, old issues that you thought were resolved can suddenly take on a life force of their own. Could be old separations, could be an accident you had, it may have been some misfortune. And looking at it again in a more psychological way is actually a very positive thing to do. But because Mars is in an opposition with Pluto at the start of this month, as it was in the last 2 weeks of last month, if there's something you're resisting about changing your world, perhaps to do with not feeling quite ready or feeling a bit vulnerable about those changes, Mars in some ways creates more tension if, like I said before, we resist the power of Pluto pushing for those changes. So Mercury comes into that relationship in what's known as a T-square. So it's a pivot between the two positions. And Pluto in the 6th house is asking you to update that part of your life and approach, which can be very calibrated and very organized, but update it with new awareness, because Pluto can be the revealer planet. Mars is about thrust, but of course it can be about anger. The 12th house can be psychological. So if you're feeling drained or out of energy, or feeling very frustrated or overwhelmed, or feel that people are kind of being a bit picky and not really being very acknowledging of your skills, then that can all start to come up to the boil as Mercury moves into your 9th house, because the 9th house can be about freedom, but it also can be about other people saying what they think and making observations about you. And because of the square to Mars and the square to Pluto, suddenly things can come into the open that could be a little painful to hear. But that brings us to the full moon of the 12th. It's in Scorpio, the moon in Scorpio in her 4, not her best location, but in an opposition with the Sun, and a little more broadly with the disruptor planet of Uranus. 3rd, 9th, conversations. And it's possible that conversations can be highly charged over the next week or so, because Uranus is the truth seeker of the zodiac. And for you, the 9th house is higher knowledge. The 3rd house, where the moon is sometimes where we can chat things through in perhaps a more frivolous way, but not really be so attached in a more feeling way. Now, obviously, the signs of Scorpio and Taurus are very much about attachment. They're fixed signs, and they can be about money. So you could be discussing finances over this 2-week period, but there may be a need to make some changes. Now, Uranus can see us wanting to create space, So it could be through decluttering. You can create more money, selling off things you no longer need. But the 8th house position of the sun can be about where we're quite intimate with someone. If suddenly that doesn't feel right with your ruler in the 9th house of freedom, you may see yourself considering whether you need at least some temporary space. So it's powerful stuff, to be honest, right at the heart of this month. And the sun and Uranus, and then Mercury and Uranus, are in a shake-up at the heart of May, from the 15th to the 20th in the case of the sun, and in the case of your ruler from the 23rd to the 26th. So there can be sudden developments. But with Uranus, there can often be opportunities. So it may be a way to look at your resources in a fresh way and be more entrepreneurial. And the only thing I would say is, if you do rush, which can be a temptation with Uranus, just be aware that not everything that we speculate on can necessarily pay off. But that sees us return to the issue of Venus, because when Venus speeds up, comes out of shadow on the 5th, by the 11th it starts to align with Mars. So although Mars can be quite a challenging influence for you this month, that trine between the two planets that are often involved in sex and attraction is very strong, which peaks on the 22nd. Now, it's possible that you could be drawn to someone, and for now the relationship may stay confidential. You may not necessarily want to share it with people. Perhaps one of you is in or coming out of a relationship which isn't quite resolved. That often can happen, of course, and that potential is there, but there's certainly the potential for an enormous attraction too. Now, because Mars in the 12th house can also make us think about old experiences and old authority figures, if there was someone from your past that you used to work with that you found very charismatic, but also someone you had respect for, you could think about how you could use the skills and talents you learned then in a new way to earn money now, or there could be a reconnection with that person in a purely professional context. Because, Virgo, when you get to the 20th, the sun reaches up to the very top of your chart. This is the midday position. This is where we get the maximum amount of sunlight. So for you, whatever your talents are, you have a fantastic chance to bring them to a wider audience, to gain more attention, but critically more recognition through the last 10 days of this month. But of course, Saturn's moving this month too, returning to Aries for the first time since 1999. And for you, that's the 8th house. And the 8th house is where we're all in. It's where we're devoted, spiritually, psychologically, financially, or sexually. But it can also be where we want to be all out, because the 8th house can be about endings, and Saturn can create limitation, particularly as it's in its full in Aries. So something that you were trying to get clear last month with that combination of Venus and Saturn, if it has proved elusive, by the end of this month, as Saturn reaches that point, over the next 3 months, you are reaching a juncture in your celestial journey when you may have to look something directly in the eye. But what Saturn does do is forge a fabulous angle to Pluto, and also Neptune is within 3 degrees of Pluto towards the end of this month, for the first time in our lifetimes, with Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius. So huge stuff. And you might find yourself thinking, how could I earn money with this gathering of energy starting to manifest in your sector of goals and success? How could I earn money which works for me in terms of my practicality? Often your great gift and the metronomic approach you have to situations, Pluto's just asking you to bring that along, but perhaps think about applying it in a bit of a different way. Saturn with Pluto can see you improve your finances if you're very, very realistic. But at the same time, as Mercury joins the Sun, your ruler, for the 3rd zodiac sign of the month on the 26th, then merging through the new moon of the 27th, the following month could see you making some very, very bold moves in terms of what you want to do for a living. For example, if you did separate around a professional relationship in April, you might think more about working for yourself and showcasing your talents. If you've got a hobby, something that you've been working on part-time could become much more at the heart of your existence, because your chance to demonstrate your brilliance, even your genius, as this month comes to a close, is enormous with a Mercury cazimi, a superior conjunction. The moving forwards Mercury meets with the Sun, while the Sun catches up with Mercury, and they merge, and the power and radiance of the Sun glows up Mercury's core abilities. And in the 10th house, which is kind of a bit Capricorn-like, it is about goals, ambitions, training, can be about leadership, could be about how you communicate your message. So although transformation is in the air, although you may feel tender and vulnerable with Mars in your 12th house, although with your ruler in a T-square with Mars and Pluto's opposition, which could see some essential truth surface in an uncomfortable way, whether the full moon is asking you to think very carefully about some of your ideals, ideas, even about how you approach your mode of transport. Don't be surprised for some Virgos if you start walking or running a lot more from the middle of this month, or equally thinking about some form of new transport, whether it's an electric bike or a scooter. Uranus very much about electricity, but equally about just being inspired by ideas, but breaking the shackles of any part of your nature that has just been sticking with a particular role for a very long time because of that appreciation you have for routine and structure. But if that has basically lost its life meaning for you, you need to reapply that part of your nature in a new environment. And that's really what the end of this month is about. So whatever your point in life you are, it's your connection with the world that's due for some kind of radical shake-up, but it's a radical shake-up that you can benefit hugely from if you're prepared to go with the flow and release relationships, connections, alliances, or jobs that just no longer serve your purpose. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great May. Remember to check out my new website, please, at www.patrickarundell.com. You can get your free natal horoscope. It's absolutely brilliant. The big three, the ascendant, sun and the moon, but also you can find out exactly where your other planets are, the signs they're in, the houses they're in, and critically the relationships between them. You can also sign up for your free daily written horoscope. Please see below for more.